Today in New York, John DeLorean awaits a court verdict on whether he stays a multimillionaire or goes bust. It's not his first major crisis. There was the scandal of his bankrupt sports car factory in Belfast, his sensational arrest by the FBI, and criminal charges of drug trafficking, racketeering, and fraud. Some believed then that his life in the fast lane was finished. Others knew John DeLorean far better than that. In the spirit of the American West, Clark Highley started out with nothing and turned a small potato farm into $1 million business. But he dreamed of owning a cattle ranch. In the north of Idaho, he found what he was searching for, a ranch in the big country for sale at $1.5 million. To raise the money, Clark Highley had to sell everything. But this was his dream. It seemed nothing could go wrong. The owner was John DeLorean, ex-vice president of General Motors. His right-hand man, Roy Nesseth, would close the deal. The hand-in-glove partnership of DeLorean and Nesseth would leave Highley broke.
Well, we always had this dream to own a cattle ranch, and we got the ranch, and then John DeLorean almost immediately turned it into a nightmare. We lost everything we had. We had bought a ranch, this beautiful ranch in our background, and we had bought 1,100 head of cattle with 350 head of registered cattle and over $100,000 worth of farm equipment. We found out we didn't own anything. It was all mortgaged to another bank, and a bunch of other people owned it, and here we sit.
We had the bill of sale. We had all the documents. They were our cattle, according to Roy Nesseth and John DeLorean. And then the bank came out and said they never did pay for them.
There were mortgages on the property which DeLorean and Nesseth had not repaid. The loan companies claimed ownership of the ranch and the livestock. Highley's bill of sale was worthless. He took DeLorean to court.
Their tactic was this: if they got in a spot where we was winning, they'd fire their attorney. Then that would stall us for quite a period of time, 6 months to a year sometimes, before we'd ever get things organized back to where we could go after them again. And by the time this all took place, we were broke.
There's nothing to say to you.
Clark Highley had been dealing with a con man. As a smooth-talking car salesman in Los Angeles, Roy Nesseth had been convicted of grand theft and forgery. At 6'6", with a reputation for violence, Nesseth was DeLorean's henchman.
He was so violent at times. I was afraid that they would wreck us or even shoot at us or anything. I was afraid of what Roy would do.
Every attorney that I took this case to said, you're morally right, but legally you've lost. And there we sit, with zip.
After 4 years and 16 court hearings, the Highleys were thrown off the ranch. They were the first of many to find out the hard way that a deal with John DeLorean was not what it seemed.
John DeLorean will have to answer to someone sometime, somewhere, about the trauma that he has put our family through. John DeLorean doesn't care what he does to other people to get what he wants. I feel that he has absolutely no morals. I feel that John DeLorean will do anything for $1.
The United Auto Workers Union says he won't set a strike deadline for talks with General Motors. The latest on the auto talks and the developments on it.
It was a long and rutted road from the opening day handshake in late July to the signing ceremony this afternoon.
Signed what he called and what Ford executives called an historic 3-year labor agreement between the UAW and the number 2 automaker. Bieber talking with reporters.
At General Motors, negotiations are continuing. Bieber says they are moving along, and he says at this time a strike deadline...
World headquarters of General Motors in Detroit. John Zachary DeLorean was the most dynamic young executive the corporation had ever seen. As the new boss of Pontiac, he steered the small rundown division into the big league.
This is the beginning of tomorrow. This is the beginning of the way it's gonna be for you and me.
DeLorean used his engineering skill and marketing flair to transform the tired old Pontiac into a dazzling high-performance machine. The new GTO, with its wide tires and sleek lines, became a craze with wealthy young Americans of the swinging 60s. DeLorean had used the filmmakers of Hollywood to sell the car with glamour and sex appeal. Success continued as the boss of Chevrolet. DeLorean was making big bucks for General Motors and for himself. The young engineer from the back streets of Detroit now enjoyed a millionaire lifestyle with a mansion in the suburbs. John DeLorean was in line for company president, but suddenly it seemed power and wealth were not enough.
DeLorean went through something like a midlife crisis, certainly, because he shucked himself of one wife and let his sideburns grow, and suddenly was affecting shirts with collar points that reached to his nipples and things, and he was just a different person. It was somewhere in that time that he came back to work after a brief absence with his face all bruised and scarred, and announced that he had had a minor traffic accident the previous weekend when in fact he had had his chin done.
John became very conceited, very, very wanted a totally different self-image. And he was always upset with his nose and his chin. He had his nose made smaller and his chin enlarged. He was running around the Birmingham area in blue jeans and barefoot, and being an executive General Motors, that was kind of ridiculous.
He became extremely vain and sort of insecure about himself. Was it enough to be a General Motors vice president? Shouldn't one be something more? And he seemed to be sort of seeking philosopher prince status.
With the revitalized image came divorce and a second wife, Californian model Kelly Harmon, young enough to be his daughter. They soon broke up. DeLorean's filmmaker friends in Hollywood laid on a bizarre consolation he'd never forget.
According to John, they had taken a house at Malibu and stocked it with all kinds of food and drink and young women who had been done up in clothing and makeup and wigs to look like Kelly. The message was that there were 1 million like her, and John shouldn't grieve too long. And John spent the weekend with all these gorgeous girls, and he said it was the classiest gesture he had ever seen, and it was a demonstration of everything that made the West Coast superior to stuffy old Detroit.
For John DeLorean, California sunshine put Detroit in the shade. Dates with Hollywood starlets made him a celebrity. But General Motors were getting nervous about their Beach Boy executive. He was soon making headlines again with his third wife, Christina Ferrare, glamorous young fashion model and aspiring actress.
The only thing that could make me happy is to see you dead.
You got to trust me completely. You are so beautiful, Mary.
In Hollywood, DeLorean's friendship was valued in more ways than one. Film and TV producers, lawyers and businessmen could make millions out of a high-flying General Motors man like DeLorean. But there was one new associate who seemed strangely out of place. It was here that DeLorean met car salesman and convicted fraudster Roy Nesseth. Nesseth entertained DeLorean at the luxury Empire West Apartments in Hollywood. In Millionaire's Row, it did not seem the kind of place Nesseth could afford, and it wasn't. The apartment belonged to a rich widow, Hazel Dean. Her business empire and millionaire lifestyle had brought celebrity status and dates with film stars like Tab Hunter. Then she met Roy Nesseth and John DeLorean. Today, she's homeless, and the family fortune has gone.
Us, so we don't have anything. It's taken everything away from us.
And you should have a great deal, shouldn't you?
Yes.
Mother became suicidal. After she became suicidal, she turned to alcohol. Her life was just basically ruined, and she moved in with us because she was so sick she couldn't take care of herself anymore. And a few months after she moved in, she had a stroke, and now basically my mother's on public aid, and the state has to support her, and she's going to be committed to a nursing home.
In the 60s, Hazel Dean's timber companies were thriving. Then came hard times. She needed someone to revive the business. On trust, she gave Roy Nesseth total control.
He was going to try and save my businesses. He was going to do it along with help from DeLorean.
When did
a private investor, I was told.
So he told you there'll be a private investor?
Yeah.
Who did he introduce you to?
John DeLorean.
But DeLorean was not to be Hazel Dean's financial savior. With Nesseth in control, the companies went bust. Millions of dollars disappeared, along with Hazel Dean's personal valuables.
What kind of jewelry did you have?
Diamonds. Diamonds and emeralds.
So a lot of money that Roy Nesseth took charge of.
A lot of money.
My mother never got any of the money back when they went, like when you go and you file a bankruptcy and that sort of thing. They went to find out where the assets of the company were and where the money was. It was all gone. There was nothing. As well as my mother's personal property that she had turned over, that was all missing as well.
I'm a private investigator working out of the Los Angeles, California area. In late March of 1984, I received an assignment from a San Diego, California law firm asking me to determine if personal property, formerly in the possession of a Mrs. Hazel Dean, was now in the home of a Mr. Roy Nesseth. I went to the Nesseth home using the subterfuge that I was there to inspect the property for fire and theft hazards and to ascertain if there were any articles of unusual value at risk. Nesseth accepted my reason for the visit and allowed me to take many photographs of the numerous objects d'art in the home. These objects include a gold leaf antique grand piano, a Rodin sculpture, a gold leaf dining set and break front, which contained a large collection of very fine china and solid silver platters and silverware.
Is there anything in that photograph that you recognize?
Yeah, the picture. And
the picture is yours?
The clock, yeah, the clock is mine.
Were there many clocks like that?
There is very few. I dare say it was one of a kind.
That's something?
That's
Elsie.
my piano. That was one of a kind because it was solid gold leafed.
And how much was that worth?
I was offered over $100,000 for it by Liberace.
But the private eye's photographs had been obtained dishonestly and could not be used in court. Hazel Dean had no evidence.
At least for us, we're going to have to wait for God to get him, because we can't. Because he's too powerful, and they have made threats to my mother. We just have to wait, because God will get him in the end.
Back at General Motors in Detroit, DeLorean had been promoted to vice president. He was one step nearer to heading the world's biggest corporation. But there were ugly rumors his promotion was not what it seemed. Suddenly, in May 1973, DeLorean resigned. Some believe he had no alternative.
I think they caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. I think there are a lot of that goes on in corporations and certainly in GM, but it's tolerated to an extent. People look the other way. John had some side deals on the Chevrolet. He's head of Chevrolet. He has a company on the outside that manufactures something that's sold to Chevrolet dealers, and he profits through a front, a typical DeLorean type scam. I think they discovered that and some other things, and they fired him for that.
If DeLorean was fired, why was he allowed to resign? Some believe he struck a deal based on inside knowledge damaging to the corporation.
I'll tell you what I think went on behind closed doors. John laid out his condemnation of General Motors, and they worked out a compromise. And the compromise had a clause, neither of us will say anything about anybody else, otherwise the whole deal is gone. And that maintains until this day, that nobody says anything at GM. In fact, when the British government made an informal call, like a banker's call, to a top person at GM, they said he's a fine guy.
Free from the boardroom, DeLorean portrayed himself in a new role, as a maverick fighting the system, a brilliant engineer who attacked General Motors for building cars which were wasteful and unsafe. Now he dreamed of building his own car. But his immediate problem was how to finance his lavish Hollywood lifestyle. A golden opportunity soon came his way. In Phoenix, Arizona, an inventor had perfected a brilliant idea. Now he needed a marketing man. He was about to find one.
This is the Avery residence. At the sound of the tone, please leave your name, phone number, and a message if you'd like.
Norm, this is John DeLorean in Detroit, calling in response to your letter. I'm very much interested, and I'd like you to call me.
Walter Pete Avery had invented a device to stop car radiators overheating. Every car maker in the world wanted to use it, but some had stolen the idea. Avery needed someone to catch the pirates and market the device worldwide. He was impressed by John DeLorean.
Well, I'd heard an awful lot about his climb up in General Motors. His personal impression to me was his understanding of the systems I was working on. And I think that probably made me think this was the man I wanted.
But DeLorean sent in Roy Nesseth. Avery and his lawyers waited to meet Nesseth for the first time.
Roy was about 2 hours late. And when he got to the restaurant, I was fit to be tied. And I jumped on him and I said, "Do you know what in the hell it's costing me to wait here for you?" And he said, "Listen, I got a broad spread eagled on a bed at Mountain Shadows. Guess what that's costing me?"
Avery refused point blank to deal with Nesseth, but was still charmed by DeLorean. He signed over his valuable patents, giving DeLorean sole rights to market the invention. Avery was supposed to get a share of the profits, but soon realized the deal was a big mistake.
DeLorean wanted some fast money, so he started going around giving these people settlements for 10 cents a kit, for 50,000 here, for 200,000 here. There was no plan. DeLorean was just sticking money in his pocket. I told him I wanted my patents back and I wanted him to get out of my life. And he said he would consider that if I would pay him $500,000 for the ownership of the patents that I had given him.
And you'd given him for free?
I'd given him for free.
DeLorean called us, wanting us to settle. I told him that Pete wasn't there, and he said, Nesseth was a very mean man. We better think about settling. And I says, Mr. DeLorean, are you threatening us? And he says, no, I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you that he's a very mean man.
I got 2 calls from a man with a foreign accent, and he made several derogatory remarks about my birth and said that there were things going to happen to me, and in both instances he said I wouldn't live until Labor Day.
I would get up every morning and just cry in my coffee the first thing, because DeLorean had promised to give us our patents back. It was in the contract that he would. And here the man was demanding $500,000, and the patents have only so many years of life, and they were diminishing every day.
And so he kept delaying, and the trial never did go to trial, but we had used about 4 years in our time. So I paid him $500,000 to get my patents back.
Once again, DeLorean had used the courts to make a fast buck, but he'd blown the chance of making a fortune.
There are hundreds of millions of cars, and every one of them has a coolant recovery system on it now. He could have sold those. He could have made hundreds of millions of dollars. John DeLorean is not a doer. He's a starter, but he never finishes anything.
The DeLorean. Gull-wing doors rise effortlessly, beckoning you inside. The sleek, stainless steel DeLorean.
In 1978, John DeLorean was about to start something else he would never finish.
The DeLorean is one of the most awaited automobiles in automotive history. Drive the DeLorean. Live the dream today.
DeLorean sports car, promoted by John DeLorean as the socially responsible car. Safe, long-lasting and fuel-efficient. A rust-proof car built with plastics and stainless steel. But mass production would cost hundreds of millions. DeLorean touted his prototype across America and Europe. The car was rejected as an expensive gamble. Then he found one investor eager to take the risk. The British government wanted the car for Belfast. It meant 2,000 new jobs with Catholics and Protestants working together. DeLorean was seen as an economic solution to the troubles of Northern Ireland.
On a Saturday afternoon, as I was lying gazing at the Atlantic, a call came through from my boss, Ronnie Henderson, saying, "You'd better get back to the office." My question, why, he answered, "John DeLorean's going to be here on Monday morning. We've got about 3 days to get a decision." So I got back as quickly as I could.
We really had a bit of a competition to see who got the chance to look at the car and who had to go to New York to meet Mr. DeLorean and possibly to meet Mrs. DeLorean. And I won.
Mr. DeLorean was heard after his first meeting with the Northern Ireland office officials, turning in the passage to one of his sidekicks and saying, "Gee, do they let those little guys out in there?" And that was precisely it. I mean, he could see at once that he was just faced by a bunch of suckers.
Every entrepreneur's a risk. That here we have what they tell me in America, the best man at his job, who's not only done this once, but done it many times over in all parts of the world, that we managed to get over to Northern Ireland the accredited best man at this type of job in the world.
We just came from our dealer convention in the States in New Orleans, and the reaction was spectacular. I think now is for all of us to do our jobs and to be sure that we do it professionally. If the car is as good as a consumer thinks it should be, we're never going to have a problem. It's just got to be, we just got to do it right, I guess is the real question.
It doesn't look just like a model, it looks like a real entity.
No, that is a real car.
Oh, it's something, yes.
Jobs for Belfast were a glittering prize the British government wanted at almost any cost. No one was asking too many questions about the track record of John DeLorean or his stainless steel car.
And that is the finish now.
Oh, yeah,
they'll all be like that. You won't have varied.
That's truly representative of what will be produced. In fact, we're going to offer a 25-year body warranty, which we haven't told British Steel yet, but they're going to stand behind it. We're going to explain that to them when we sign our final contract.
Why didn't the British government do more to discover what this man's background was? I continued to pursue this question. And finally, a bureaucrat within what was then known as NIDA, the Northern Ireland Development Association, told me that in fact they did find out there were lawsuits, there were business failures in John DeLorean's history. But then he replied, when I asked why didn't that matter, he said, well, that's something all your American businessmen go through, bankruptcies and lawsuits. That's part of doing business in America, isn't it?
We're accepting applications for direct dealer sales agreements. We plan on distributing our products through a small group of dealers, approximately 150 to 400 of them in all 50 states.
Mac Magruder from Palm Springs, California. How you doing?
Good to see you.
Hey, I got 44 orders.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
American dealers with their customers and the British government with their money were dazzled by the glamorous DeLorean roadshow. But his car still needed years of development. For help, DeLorean turned to Colin Chapman, the engineering genius of Britain's Team Lotus. Chapman's cars had dominated Formula One, but the huge cost of Grand Prix racing had left Lotus on the brink of bankruptcy. DeLorean's government money was a godsend, and Chapman was determined to make the most of it. He persuaded DeLorean to spend millions having the car completely rebuilt at his factory in Norfolk. But Chapman's devotion to the project was soon being questioned.
I used to visit Lotus periodically, and the engineers would tell me that we've got 100 people on the payroll, they're working on Lotus cars. When you and John come officially, They move back to Lotus cars and they put out a DeLorean and pretending they're working on it. They're doing these engineering things which are more for themselves than for us. And actually, when I went back to John, I said, John, this is what's happening. He said, always happens in Detroit. When you hire consultants, they rip you off. And he said, everybody knows that. And I said, but John, why do they have to rip us off?
I saw Colin Chapman at the first Detroit Grand Prix and was kidding him about his DeLorean connection and being rude about his arrangement with Mr. DeLorean, suggesting that he had found some kind of a cash cow and that he ought to be ashamed of himself for bilking the unwary in that way. And he laughed and said, he said, I'll tell you something. He said, I wish that somebody like DeLorean would come along in this business every 2 or 3 years because he said he has not only helped me upgrade my facilities and add on to the factory and one thing and another, but he said he's been responsible for a nice infusion of cash into the racing program as well. He regarded DeLorean as a Christmas present, just the most wonderful thing that had happened to him in recent years.
Chapman had every reason to celebrate. He and DeLorean had a Swiss bank account containing $17 million of DeLorean Company funds. The money had gone to a mysterious corporation in Geneva called GPD. In reality, its headquarters were nothing more than a post office box. The $17 million was supposed to pay Lotus for rebuilding the car, but the money was never sent. Back in Belfast, the car was behind schedule, there were technical problems and disagreements in the boardroom.
Will it be?
I thought we had drawings out on that, Mike.
We did have drawings out on it, which we sent to the States, as we said. We had their comments came back and said that we wanted it broken up very much more. The latest sketch was the one we've got now.
Well, my guys can't even get them. So
I'll give you one. If she's off with this, I will go and get some personal copies.
There was a growing degree of friction between the directors in the boardroom, quite obviously, later on. And some of it was due to, I suppose, political ambitions amongst the directors, and some was the general state of the company at the time, which was anxiety personified, I suppose.
While the problems grew in Belfast, DeLorean was enjoying the high life in New York. His penthouse offices and lavish lifestyle were costing Britain's taxpayers almost $1 million a month.
DeLorean Motor Company, good morning. One moment, please. Good morning, DeLorean.
What happened is he moved to New York and he started to live the lifestyle of an entrepreneur who has been successful. The only problem was he wasn't successful. Once you succeed, you're entitled to live as grandly as you want. I mean, that's kind of the American way. Well, what happened is he's tried to live that lifestyle before he'd earned it. And he was doing it with corporate money, apparently, and outside money. And he lost interest in the car company because he started to be more occupied with his personal financing to finance his lifestyle.
John DeLorean did nothing on the cheap. His home in New York was modestly described as an apartment. Inside, it had 20 rooms with antiques and valuable works of art. The butler and chauffeur were paid for by the unwitting British taxpayer. The apartment alone was worth $5 million. Outside New York, the DeLorean country mansion worth $3.5 million. And in California, an avocado ranch worth $4 million. Some directors tried to stop DeLorean squandering company money on his personal lifestyle. His old sidekick, Roy Nesseth, had ways to shut them up.
I got a call from Roy Nesseth, and he said if you don't cooperate, that's when he threatened my life and my family's life if I wouldn't cooperate. And I figured that was enough.
He threatened you?
Threatened my children.
With what?
Nesseth threatened my children, in effect, that they would be harmed.
He said he would remove my head from my shoulders.
Why did he say that to you?
Because I was endeavoring to curtail his activities in the company.
He was the hard man of the DeLorean personality. He was an extension of the DeLorean personality. Tall, tough, mean, guttural. His whole life was John, and he was one of John's personalities.
Smile, John.
DeLorean unveiled his new Belfast-built car in 1980.
I think is an outstanding car from several standpoints. First, it's a car that has handling and performance characteristics that are truly comparable with the finest sports cars built in the world. And that's thanks largely to the ingenuity of probably the finest automobile engineer I have ever met in my life, Colin Chapman. I'll introduce Colin now. Anyhow, let me now show you the product of all these years of work by our people, our new car, which we hope is the first of a long line of new cars.
Beneath the stainless steel skin, this was not the futuristic car DeLorean had promised. Just a quick fix based on an old Lotus design.
Here we were with DeLorean's ethical car, which was not even inside the economy figures that were required at the time. We had a car which wasn't anything like as fast as he'd said at the time. Simple matters which affect the general public. This fuel tank didn't give us the number of miles that he wanted, and so on. It was a very different car, really, to what was being sold.
With production behind schedule, the first hastily assembled cars were shipped to the United States. DeLorean engineers feared the worst. The cars were far from ready for American showrooms.
The first person that got into the car on the showroom floor sat in the driver's seat and then closed the gull-wing door. And after he closed the gull-wing door, he went to get out, and he couldn't get out because there was a problem with the lock of the door, and it turned out that this was happening in showrooms all around the country. In fact, I think it was something somewhere down south. Two people got in the car and shut both doors, and they were in the car for 3 or 4 hours until mechanics could get them out.
In Belfast, the engineers wanted to slow down production to get the quality right. Incredibly, they were ordered to build the cars even faster. DeLorean was hyping production to make the company look so good on paper, the public would rush to buy shares, and he could walk away with a massive personal fortune. But more cars meant more problems.
We had brought a number of cars into the United States that were not perfect. They needed $2,500 of retrofitting. We knew that we had to have quality cars out there because we were so high visibility. All the recommendations were slow down, work out the mistakes, scale back, perfect it, and get the next load over here of good cars. Well, all that went to the wind. We hired 1,000 people and didn't even train them. We began producing cars we couldn't sell. It was the formula for disaster in order to be successful with the public offering.
In reality, the car company was worthless, but if DeLorean could sell shares to the public, he could make more than $100 million for himself at the expense of Britain's taxpayers. His plan was ingenious.
John wanted to form a big company, DeLorean Motors Holding Company, a brand new entity, in one of his brilliant financial arrangements. This company would take all the profits from DeLorean Motors, but have none of the liabilities, including the British debt.
But this woman was determined to stop DeLorean's scheme. His English secretary, Marion Gibson, had seen how he really spent British taxpayers' money. She suspected fraud and flew to London with incriminating evidence, including a private memo to DeLorean from fellow director Bill Haddad.
I am also worried about what a parliamentary inquiry will uncover about our expenditures on both sides of the ocean. There are the official complaints which can be one of John DeLorean milking the company for his private profit. Some of the discredit regarding the house, and some of the expenditures which appear to have been fuzzed, like a 10,000-pound expenditure at Harrods for gold faucets, etc. I recently learned, for example, that we may have hidden some of the capital expense of the house in expenses for the project. In short, the books were altered.
I have not received a single cent from these operations which is not fully disclosed in our public documents, which are open to everyone to see and have been. And neither I nor anyone connected with me nor any of my companies has received a cent beyond those with which we are entitled and which is reported.
Despite the denials, DeLorean was forced to withdraw his stock market plan. Now, producing more cars than he could sell, he was out of money. In the past, by threatening to close the factory, he'd forced the government to bail him out. This time, they called a halt.
From the government's point of view, we're very concerned about employment, and we're very concerned about suppliers who have got money outstanding to them. I think that was all I'd better say at this stage.
Good news for Mr. DeLorean then or not?
Sorry?
Good news for Mr. DeLorean then, do you think, generally or not?
Well, I think, no, I would think this is going to be a very difficult day, I would think.
With Roy Nesseth at his side, DeLorean flew to London to discuss a rescue plan.
Nobody at the stage knows exactly what to happen. And this is my final remark. I think there is a very good chance that the factory in Belfast will continue.
To save the factory, DeLorean had to find $10 million fast. He promised the British government there was a secret investor. In a Los Angeles hotel room, the identity of the mysterious backer was revealed. Hidden FBI cameras filmed John DeLorean apparently clinching a $24 million drugs deal.
Okay, you know what to do with it. This is the other half that's going out of here as soon as we're done. And between this and the other, it'll generate about 4.5, not less than 4.5 mil.
Better than gold. Gold weighs more than that, for God's sakes. I think it's going to be wonderful for everyone. A lot of success for everybody. Gentlemen? And for all your phone calls. Thank you. Good luck to everybody. You bet. Hi, John. Very question with the FBI. You're under arrest for narcotics law violation. Say that the Jose Aguilar, he's with DEA. Can you stand up, please? I understand it. Okay, turn around. Yeah.
Arrangements had been made for the delivery of approximately 100 kilos of cocaine, which were to be purchased by DeLorean for distribution in Southern California. He was expressing an interest in financing some type of operation that would produce quickly large sums of money on return from the investment.
From the moment of DeLorean's arrest, the Belfast factory was dead. The loss to the British taxpayer, £85 million. The loss to Belfast, 2,500 jobs.
He destroyed those people. You know what John did? He brought them, they stopped hoping in Belfast. Those people allowed themselves to believe in John. And he took them to the edge of the mountain and threw them off. And that, to me, is the greatest tragedy of the DeLorean story. Those people, I don't think they'll ever hope again, they'll never believe again. He had a great chance there, and he blew it out of his own greed.
In his Los Angeles prison cell, DeLorean was proclaiming God's forgiveness.
An amazing thing happened to me. After I was arrested, I'm standing at my bunk reading the Bible, and I get this most miraculous, warm feeling as though I'm being embraced from head to foot. And I felt that the Lord had told me everything was going to be okay.
After 10 days behind bars, the born-again John DeLorean was released on bail. To demonstrate his new faith, he carried a Bible for all to see.
Every day they're at center stage, the former automaker and his fashion model wife.
John DeLorean appeared on the courthouse steps after hearing the first prospective juror in his trial say he's probably guilty.
I don't think that when the truth comes out, there's any way in the world that I can be convicted of anything. I'm an absolutely innocent man.
Defense lawyers will argue a greedy government informant set him up with a promise of legitimate investors for his company.
So the end of the first week of testimony left it ambiguous as to whether DeLorean had indeed agreed to join the drug smuggling plot. The government's star witness, drug smuggler James Hoffman, was hustled into the courthouse, slumped in the back of a speeding car.
Government informant James Hoffman told the jury DeLorean asked him to set up the deal to save his floundering car company.
He's pictured DeLorean as money-hungry and unprincipled, not the victim of government entrapment.
Outside court, the public image of DeLorean the devoted husband was showing twice daily. So were Christina's outfits. She was accused of parading as a glamorous prop to sway the jury.
It's been very difficult both for John and for me. And there are times when I do get angry and I say, you know, I don't feel like being there, but I want to be there for John. I don't care how it looks to the judge or to the jury. He needs me.
The show would soon be over. Within weeks, Christina would file for divorce. Despite being filmed with a suitcase of cocaine, DeLorean was found not guilty. In a case that made legal history, the jury decided he'd been entrapped by government agents.
Life as a hard-working industrialist has been tattered and torn. I don't know, would you buy a used car from me?
It's been so horribly expensive. How are you going to pay for all?
If I could get every American to send us $2, we'd be all right.
Yeah, maybe $1.50.
$1.50, that's what we need. I'm hoping that as a result of this broadcast that every American will send me $2, and then I'll have...
Actually, we would take $1.50 or $1.25.
If they did, I could pay my legal fees and mount a proper defense in other areas.
It's been incredible. The phone has been ringing all day long here at the agency. People wanting to know the P.O. box number to send money to the John DeLorean Defense Fund.
DeLorean would need his defense fund. In Detroit, he was to stand trial again, this time accused of stealing money from his car company. With his hand on the Bible, DeLorean had faith in the outcome.
God didn't save me in the last one to stick me into this. I guarantee you it's going to turn out fine, and I'm anxious, of course, to be vindicated and get on with my life.
The prosecution said documents found in DeLorean's basement revealed that with the aid of Chapman, he'd stolen $8.5 million from his own car company. The money should have gone to Chapman's factory for work on the DeLorean car. Instead, it was laundered through their Swiss company GPD and then used by DeLorean to buy this, a snowmobile factory at Logan in Utah. But DeLorean claimed the money was a legitimate loan from Colin Chapman. He said there was a document to prove it. But was the loan agreement a forgery? The complex fraud trial ran for 2 months.
Are there any comments you can offer as this thing goes to the jury tomorrow? I mean, will they start deliberating?
I think the only comments that I'd be willing to offer are those I made to the jury. I have a lot of confidence in the system. I think the system works. I think these jurors are as intelligent and conscientious as any jurors we could get throughout the nation, and hopefully they'll arrive at the verdict that we believe is just and appropriate.
And as I said earlier, it's in God's hands. That's all there is to it.
My verdict was guilty. I felt based on the information that we had about GPD, on the movement of the money through Switzerland and the bank loans back to the United States, that it just seemed that the evidence indicated that he was guilty.
Others disagreed. They could not believe the charismatic John DeLorean was guilty.
One juror, who was very, very convinced of Mr. DeLorean's innocence, had her verdict decided from the moment we left the courtroom. She never looked at a document. It was almost as if she felt the documents were going to confuse her. And as she said it when she folded her arms in the jury room, I know what my verdict is, and I don't need to be confused by the documents. Definitely she dealt with him like he was a rock star, and it was almost as if she was an overawed fan. At the end of the trial, he said to her, you know, I've watched across the courtroom for 8 weeks, and I've wanted to kiss you on the cheek. Well, she started to squeal when he said that, and she really didn't stop squealing for at least 5 or 10 minutes.
Mistakenly, the jurors thought they had to be unanimous. Since they could not agree, they cleared DeLorean of all charges. Too late, the judge discovered their mistake.
The judge just very nonchalantly said, if you wouldn't have agreed, you would have been a hung jury. And when I heard him say that, my stomach turned upside down, and I said, Your Honor, we have made a major mistake.
What was the turning point in the trial, Juanita, in your mind?
I think the turning point was when we picked the jury. We got some very conscientious people that were going to listen to the facts instead of listen to the non-facts that the government was trying to present. And by having that kind of a jury, I think they saw that there was no case there.
What do you think of what you saw in there? Can you imagine what morality 3 men must have who would create a totally synthetic, fabricated scenario like that false address to try to deprive a man of his freedom? What kind of animal would do that? I mean, I'm so incensed.
Colin Chapman had taken his side of the story to the grave. He had died from a heart attack 4 years earlier. If he did loan the money to DeLorean, where did he get it from? And if there wasn't a loan, who forged the vital loan agreement? Only after the trial, and too late for the prosecution, did new evidence emerge in a statement by DeLorean's former wife, Christina.
On a separate occasion, while you and Mr. DeLorean were at Bedminster, New Jersey, you observed Mr. DeLorean while he was seated in his office at Bedminster, New Jersey, practicing signing the signatures of other people on blank pieces of paper. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you know whether or not Mr. DeLorean had equipment for aging documents?
Well, he used, I don't know if this is equipment, he used surgical gloves and an old Westinghouse lamp bulb, which was so big, and something to hook it up to the closet with, and that's what he used.
And what did he do with the document and the lamp?
He held the paper over the lamp.
DeLorean denied the allegation.
In retrospect, what do you now think was the deal struck between DeLorean and Chapman?
Oh, I believe that the $17.5 million was divided, well, I know, was divided between the parties.
But whether or not DeLorean stole millions of dollars from his Belfast car company, those who'd lost their money were determined he'd pay them back. A fight began in the courts to seize his New York apartment, by now worth $6 million. His country mansion worth $5 million. And the Logan factory worth about $10 million. But for the time being, despite years of lawsuits, criminal trials, and business failure, DeLorean was wealthier than ever and still praising the Lord.
I've always been very religious. I used to go to St. Patrick's, I think, for the previous 10 years. Every morning of my life, 7 days a week, and pray for an hour, light a candle, do all the ritualistic things. But I guess I really didn't have a proper relationship with Christ.
I feel if the man was a born-again Christian and he really has changed his life around, that he would give Clark Highley a call and say, Clark, I am sorry, I'm a born-again Christian. I know that I scammed you out of all your money. What can I do to help you? But I think the man is just one total big lie.
Obviously, if the man had made his peace with God, how could he keep my mother's things? And how could he continue to do evil things or even associate with an evil man like Roy Nesseth?
He had this brilliant way of letting you see what you want to see. To me, he was the liberal, socially conscious, dynamic businessman risking his career to help other people. But you turn it, he was the cruel person stealing money from people who, a farm, a business, a patent, all of that. And he had this magnificent ability to switch into these personalities very easily, like an actor, better than an actor. It's just a special kind of personality. The only word I can say is social, psychopath motivated by delusions of grandeur, but based on money, not necessarily power.
But now, after 8 years tracking the missing DeLorean millions, the British have won their case to sue him personally for $53 million plus interest. DeLorean has appealed. The final verdict will decide whether John DeLorean continues his life in the fast lane or reaches the end of the road.